I brought you here to be my wife on paper, nothing more." Clara Whitmore stood in the doorway of a frozen cabin watching the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry pack supplies to leave on their wedding night. "Elias, please." "Don't." He didn't look at her. "You'll have food, shelter, safety. That's what I promised. But if you're expecting warmth, affection, love, you married the wrong man. I buried those parts of myself 7 years ago, and they're staying buried." He walked past her into the blizzard without another word. And Clara understood with brutal clarity her husband hadn't brought her into his life. He'd built walls to keep her permanently outside it. Before we continue Clara's story, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and stay with us until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's return to that frozen Thursday and discover what happens when a woman refuses to accept the walls a broken man has built around his heart. The stagecoach driver had warned her. "Ma'am, Elias Boone is a good man," he'd said as they approached Coldwater Ridge. "But he's not a warm one. Don't take it personal." Clara had nodded politely, thinking she understood. She didn't. The first moment she saw Elias, he was standing in snow that reached his knees, waiting outside the general store where the stage stopped. Tall, still, his hat pulled low against the wind. When their eyes met, something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe relief, but it vanished before Clara could name it. "Mrs. Boone," he said, not Clara, not welcome, just the legal fact of what she'd become. "Mr. Boone," she replied. He picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing and started walking. Clara followed her breath, catching in the brutal cold, her fingers already numb despite her gloves. The cabin was small, clean. A fire burned in the hearth, which meant he'd prepared for her arrival. But when Elias set down her trunk and turned to face her, the distance in his eyes made the room feel colder than the storm outside. "You'll have the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep out here." "That's not necessary." "It is." The finality in his voice stopped her. "I'll provide for you." Elias continued, his tone measured, careful. "You'll want for nothing. But I need you to understand something, Clara. This arrangement, it's practical. I needed a wife for legal purposes. You needed a way west. We both got what we needed, but that's where it ends." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. "Your letters were honest," he interrupted. "I never promised you affection. I promised you safety and security. That's what you'll have." He walked to the door, pulled on his coat. "Where are you going?" Clara asked. "Work." "In this storm? Someone has to." And then he was gone. Clara stood in the empty cabin listening to the wind howl against the walls, and understood that she'd made a terrible mistake. Not in coming here, but in believing the warmth of a man's letters could translate into the warmth of his presence. She unpacked in silence. Three days passed before she saw him again. Elias returned each evening after dark, ate whatever she'd prepared without comment, and disappeared into his bedroll by the fire. He spoke only when necessary. "Storm's getting worse. Town meeting tomorrow. Need anything from the store?" Clara tried to bridge the gap with conversation. "How long have you been in Coldwater Ridge?" 7 years. "Do you enjoy the work?" "It's necessary." "The people seem kind." "They are." Every answer was a door closing. On the fourth morning, Clara decided she couldn't live like this. When Elias came in from checking the horses, she was waiting at the table with coffee poured for both of them. "Sit," she said. He hesitated. "Please." Elias sat, but his posture remained guarded, defensive. "I need to understand something," Clara said. "If you didn't want a wife, a real wife, why did you send for me?" For the first time, she saw something shift behind his eyes. Not warmth, but something rawer. Pain, maybe. "The town council required it," Elias said finally. "A lawman with a family is more stable, more trustworthy. I needed to keep this position. So I'm a prop." You're a necessity." The brutal honesty of it should have hurt more than it did. But Clara was starting to understand that Elias Boone didn't deal in pretty lies. He dealt in hard truths. "And what about what I need?" she asked quietly. Elias looked at her directly for the first time since she'd arrived. "You needed safety, a home, protection. You have all of that. I needed a partner. Then you married the wrong man." He stood, placed his cup in the basin, and walked out. Clara sat alone in the cabin and made a decision she would not leave. Not because she had nowhere to go, but because something in Elias Boone's carefully constructed walls told her they'd been built for a reason. And she intended to find out why. The town of Coldwater Ridge was smaller than Clara had imagined. 200 souls, give or take, most of them miners or their families. The general store, the saloon, the church, the schoolhouse, all clustered around a single frozen street. Clara started going into town alone. The women were curious about her. Suspicious, too. "You're Elias's wife?" Martha Hendricks asked on Clara's second visit to the store. She was the shopkeeper's wife, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "I am." Martha looked her up and down. Didn't think he'd ever marry again. The word "again" landed like a stone. "He was married before?" Clara asked carefully. Martha's expression shifted surprise, then regret. "He didn't tell you?" "No." "Oh, honey." Martha's voice softened. "That's not my story to share. But maybe it explains some things." Clara wanted to press, but something in Martha's tone told her she wouldn't get more. Not yet. Instead, she asked, "Is there work available? I taught school back east." Martha's eyebrows rose. "You want to work? I need purpose." "Well?" Martha considered this. "Old Mrs. Calloway's been teaching the children, but her health is failing. Town could use a real school teacher. You'd have to convince the council, though." "I will." And she did. The town council met the following week. 5 men, all of them weathered by frontier life, all of them skeptical of a newcomer. But when Clara stood before them and outlined her qualifications, 8 years of teaching experience, credentials from a normal school in Pennsylvania, a genuine desire to serve the community, something shifted. It was Elias who tipped the balance. "She's qualified," he said simply, "and the children need her." The council approved her appointment. After the meeting, Clara waited for Elias outside. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For supporting me in there." Elias looked uncomfortable. "You earned it on your own merit." "But you spoke for me." It was the truth. He started to walk away, then paused. "Clara." She turned. "You're good at this," he said. "Building a life here. Making yourself part of the town. That's good." It was the closest thing to approval he'd ever given her. Clara watched him disappear into the evening shadows and felt something dangerously close to hope. Teaching became Clara's anchor. 12 children ages 6 to 14 crowded into the one-room schoolhouse each morning. They were rough around the edges, frontier children who'd learned survival before they'd learned their letters, but they were eager, hungry for knowledge. Clara loved them immediately. And slowly through the children, she began to understand Coldwater Ridge. "Miss Clara," a girl named Annie asked one afternoon, "is it true you're Sheriff Boone's wife?" "It is." "Is he nice at home?" The question was innocent, but it cut deep. "He's fair," Clara said carefully. "My pa says Sheriff Boone is the best man in town." A boy named Thomas added. "Says he saved his life once during a mine collapse." "He's always helping people," Annie agreed. "But he never smiles. Why doesn't he smile?" Clara didn't have an answer, but that night when Elias came home, she asked him about the mine collapse. "It was nothing," he said. "Thomas's father says you saved his life." "I did my job." "Elias." Clara set down the dish she was washing. "Why won't you let anyone see you?" He froze. "What?" "Everyone in this town respects you, trusts you. even loves you in their way. But you keep them all at arm's length. Why? That's not. It is. And you do the same to me. Elias's jaw tightened. I told you what this marriage was. You told me what it wasn't. But you never told me why. For a moment, she thought he might answer. Something vulnerable flickered across his face, a door opening just a crack. But then it slammed shut again. Some things are better left alone, Clara. He walked out into the night. Clara stood in the cabin, frustration and sadness warring inside her. Because she was beginning to understand something crucial, Elias Boone wasn't cold by nature. He was cold by choice. And whatever had driven him to make that choice was still holding him captive.
Destroying.
Winter deepened. The storms came more frequently, burying the town under layers of ice and snow. Clara settled into a rhythm, teaching during the day, cooking and maintaining the cabin in the evening, sleeping alone in a bedroom that should have been shared. Elias remained a ghost in his own home. But Clara started to notice things. Small things. The way he always made sure the wood box was full before he left each morning. The way he'd silently repaired the loose hinge on the schoolhouse door without being asked. The way his eyes lingered on her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, not with desire, but with something more complicated. Regret, maybe. Or fear. One evening, Clara found a package on the table. Inside was a book, a beautiful leather-bound copy of Whitman's poetry. There was no note. When Elias came home that night, Clara held it up. "This is from you." It wasn't a question. Elias's expression was carefully neutral. "You mentioned you liked poetry. In one of your letters. You remembered. I remember everything you wrote." The admission hung between them. "Thank you," Clara said softly. It's thoughtful. It's just a book." "No, it's not." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "Clara, you care," she said. "You can pretend you don't, but you do. Why is that so terrifying to you?" His face went pale. "Don't," he said, his voice rough. "Don't push this." "Why not?" "Because you don't know what you're asking for." "Then tell me." "No." He left again. But this time Clara noticed his hands were shaking. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Clara was walking home from the schoolhouse when she heard shouting from the saloon. She hurried past, but then recognized one of the voices. Elias. She stopped. Through the window she could see him facing down a drunk miner twice his size. The man was armed. Elias wasn't. He'd set his gun belt on the bar. "You're done drinking, Jack," Elias said calmly. "Time to go home." "You don't tell me what to do, Boone." "I do when you're causing trouble." The miner's hand went to his knife. Clara's breath caught. But Elias didn't flinch. He just stood there steady and unafraid, talking the man down with quiet, relentless calm. "Think about your wife, Jack. Your children. They need you to walk out of here whole. They don't need nothing. They need their father. I know that better than anyone." Something in those words landed. The miner's shoulders sagged. He dropped the knife. Elias helped him outside, made sure he got home safely. Clara watched it all from the shadows. When Elias finally headed back toward the cabin, she was waiting for him. "You could have been killed," she said. Elias didn't seem surprised to see her. "It's my job." "Your job is to keep the peace, not to throw your life away." "I wasn't." "You took off your gun. You faced an armed man without protection. That's not bravery, Elias. That's something else." His expression darkened. "Go home, Clara." "Not until you tell me the truth." "What truth?" "Why you act like your life doesn't matter." The words hit him like a physical blow. For a long moment, he just stared at her. And then finally, the wall cracked. "It doesn't," he whispered. "Not anymore." Clara's heart broke. "Elias, I had a family." The words came out flat dead. "A wife, a daughter, they died. Fever, 7 years ago. I held them while they burned from the inside, and there was nothing I could do. And when it was over, when they were gone, I buried them on a hill outside town. And I promised myself I would never. He couldn't finish. Clara stepped closer. Never what? Never let myself care that much again. Elias's voice cracked. Because if I let someone in and I lose them, Clara, I can't survive that twice. I can't. Everything suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. The distance, the walls, the careful, deliberate coldness. It was all armor. So you brought me here, Clara said slowly, thinking you could keep me at a distance, thinking you could have the appearance of a life without the risk of actually living one. Elias nodded, his face etched with pain. But it's not working, is it? Clara asked softly. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw the truth written in his eyes. No, he whispered. It's not. The wind howled around them. Snow began to fall, and Clara made a choice. She closed the distance between them and took his hand. Elias flinched but didn't pull away. I'm not going to die, Elias, she said. I'm not going to disappear, and I'm not going to let you push me away because you're afraid. You want to know what terrifies me? Living in a house with a man who's already decided I'm temporary, who's already planning for the day I'm gone. That's not protection. It's just lonely. Clara, I'm staying, she said firmly. Not because you'll let me in, but because I choose to. And maybe if you're brave enough, you'll choose it too. She squeezed his hand once, then let go and walked back to the cabin. Elias stood in the falling snow, watching her go. And for the first time in 7 years, he let himself feel something other than cold. He didn't come inside that night. Clara woke the next morning to find Elias asleep in the chair by the fire, still wearing his coat, his hat pulled low over his face. He'd come in sometime after she'd gone to bed, but he hadn't taken his usual spot on the floor. He'd stayed upright as if sleeping was something he didn't deserve. Clara made coffee quietly, not wanting to wake him. But when she set the cup on the table, his eyes opened. You stayed, he said. His voice was rough with exhaustion. I told you I would. Elias sat up slowly, rubbing his face. Clara, what you said last night. I meant it. I know. That's what scares me. Clara pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Then be scared. But don't shut me out because of it. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. Fear against hope. Self-preservation against something that might be longing. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. Do what? Let someone in. I've spent 7 years making sure I don't. Then we'll figure it out together, Clara said. But Elias, you have to try. Actually try. Not just go through the motions while keeping your heart locked away. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. And if I can't, then at least you'll know you tried. That's more honest than what we've been doing. Elias was quiet for a long time. Then so softly she almost missed it. All right. It was the smallest word, but it changed everything. The shift between them wasn't sudden. It was gradual, careful, like ice melting at the edges. Elias started eating breakfast with her instead of taking his coffee and leaving immediately. The conversations were still sparse, but they existed. How are the children? He asked one morning. Learning. Thomas is reading at a 4th grade level now. Annie's struggling with arithmetic, but she's trying. You're good with them. They make it easy. A pause. Then, you make everything look easy. Clara glanced up surprised. I don't feel easy. Most days I feel like I'm stumbling through. You hide it well. So do you. Elias's mouth almost curved into something that might have been a smile. Almost. But it was progress. At school, Clara noticed a pattern among her students. Several of them were coming to class hungry. Not just morning hunger, but the kind that came from empty cupboards at home. She mentioned it to Martha at the general store. The Collinses. Martha sighed. Frank Collins got injured in the mine 3 weeks ago. Can't work. They're struggling. What about the town? Can't we help? Pride, honey. Frank won't take charity. Says he'll provide for his own. Even if his children go hungry. Especially then. Clara's jaw tightened. That's not pride. That's stubbornness. That evening she told Elias about it. Frank Collins is a good man, Elias said. But you're right. He won't accept help. Then we give it in a way he can accept. How? Clara thought for a moment. You need someone to help repair the fence behind the cabin, don't you? I can do it myself. But you're busy, and Frank needs work. Pay him to do it. Elias understood immediately. Create a job. Exactly. Pay him fair wages. Let him keep his dignity. Something shifted in Elias's expression, something that looked almost like admiration. That's smart. It's human. The next day, Elias offered Frank Collins a week's work. Frank accepted, grateful for the opportunity. By the end of the week, the Collins children were no longer coming to school hungry. And that evening, when Elias came home, Clara was waiting. Thank you, she said. You're the one who thought of it. But you made it happen. Elias hung up his coat, and for once he didn't immediately look for a reason to leave. We make a good team, he said quietly. Clara's heart squeezed. Yes, we do. But not everyone in Coldwater Ridge was happy about the changes they saw. Your husband's different lately, Martha commented one afternoon while Clara was shopping. Warmer somehow. Is that a problem? No, but people notice, and some of them wonder why. Why should it matter? Martha lowered her voice. Because Elias Boone has been the same man for 7 years. Steady, reliable, cold. People got used to it. Now he's changing, and change makes folks nervous. Clara felt a spike of defensive anger. He's allowed to change. Of course he is. But honey, you need to understand something. When Elias lost his family, this whole town watched him nearly destroy himself with grief. It took years for him to find solid ground again. Some people worry that if he opens up, if he lets himself feel things again, he might slip. He won't. How do you know? Because I won't let him. Martha studied her for a long moment. You really love him, don't you? Clara hadn't let herself think the word before, but hearing it spoken aloud, she couldn't deny it. Yes, she whispered. I do. Does he know? No. And I won't tell him. Not until he's ready to hear it. Thug. That readiness came in unexpected moments. One evening, Clara was reading by the fire when Elias came in from his rounds. Instead of going straight to his bedroll, he sat in the chair across from her. What are you reading? He asked. Clara showed him the Whitman collection he'd given her. Any good? Beautiful. Listen to this. She read aloud, I am large, I contain multitudes. Elias was quiet. What does that mean to you? That people are more than one thing. We can be strong and scared, hopeful and broken. We contain multitudes. And contradictions. Especially contradictions. Elias leaned back, his eyes distant. Emma, my wife, she used to read to me, poetry mostly, said it made hard days easier. It was the first time he'd spoken her name aloud to Clara. She sounds wonderful, Clara said gently. She was everything good. Tell me about her. Elias's face tightened. Why, because she was part of your life. And if we're going to move forward, I need to understand where you've been. He stood abruptly. I can't. Elias. No, Clara. I can't talk about her. Not yet. He walked outside and Clara heard the sound of an axe hitting wood. He chopped firewood for an hour, working out whatever storm was raging inside him. When he finally came back in, his hands were blistered and his face was drawn. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. I pushed too hard. You didn't. I'm not ready. Clara nodded. When you are, I'll be here. Elias looked at her with something raw in his eyes. Why are you so patient with me? Because you're worth it. He crossed the room, then stopped in front of her chair and did something he'd never done before. He reached out and touched her face, just his fingertips against her cheek, feather light and trembling. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Yes, you do. He pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned, but Clara had seen it. The crack in his armor, the want behind the fear. It was enough. The town council approached Clara in March with a proposal. We want to start a community lending library, Alderman Peterson said. Folks are asking for it. You're educated, you understand books. Would you organize it? Clara felt a surge of excitement. I'd be honored. Good. We'll allocate funds for initial purchases. You handle the rest. When Clara told Elias that night, his response surprised her. You'll need space. The schoolhouse is too small. I know. I was thinking maybe the church basement. Use the cabin. Clara blinked. What? The main room. During the day while you're teaching, I'm out. You could host lending hours in the evening. People could come by. Elias, this is your home. It's our home, he corrected quietly. And homes are meant to be lived in, used, shared. Clara stared at him stunned. You'd really let strangers into your space? If it means something to you, yes. It was such a profound shift from the man who'd barely let her into his life 2 months ago that Clara felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. Just make it good. Make it matter. I will. And she did. Within 2 weeks, Clara had transformed one wall of the cabin into floor-to-ceiling shelves. Elias built them himself, working late into the night with a focus and care that spoke of something deeper than carpentry. Why are you putting so much effort into this? Clara asked one evening, watching him sand a shelf smooth. Because it's important to you. But why does that matter? Elias's hands stilled. Because you matter. The words hung between them. Elias, don't, he said quickly. Don't make me explain it. Just let me build the shelves. Clara smiled despite herself. All right. The library opened on a Saturday. 20 people came the first evening, browsing the modest collection Clara had assembled. Children sat on the floor, adults perused shelves, and the cabin that had been so cold and empty for years suddenly felt alive. Elias watched from the doorway, not quite part of it, but not entirely separate either. Martha Hendricks approached him. This is good what you're doing. Clara did it. You let her. That's just as important. Elias shifted uncomfortably. She's good for this town. She's good for you too. He didn't argue. Later, after everyone had left and Clara was reshelving books, Elias spoke. My daughter loved stories. Clara froze. Sarah. She was 5 when she died. She'd make me read to her every night. Same 3 books over and over. I'd try to skip pages and she'd catch me every time. Clara's throat tightened. What were the books? A collection of fairy tales, a picture book about a bear, and the Bible, just the parts with animals. She loved animals. She sounds wonderful. She was. Elias's voice cracked. She was perfect. And when she got sick, she kept asking me to read to her. Even when she could barely stay awake, she'd say, just one more, Papa. Just one more. Clara crossed to him, took his hand. The last thing I read to her was the story of Noah's Ark. Elias continued. She liked the idea of all the animals being saved, being safe, and then she closed her eyes, and she never opened them again. I'm so sorry. I haven't read a story out loud since that night. Couldn't. But tonight, watching those children with the books, listening to them laugh, it made me think maybe it's time to remember without it killing me. Clara squeezed his hand. It is time. Sarah wouldn't want you to stop living because she couldn't. How do you know what she'd want? Because children love their parents, and they want them to be happy. Elias pulled Clara into his arms, then holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart racing, could feel the tremors running through him as years of suppressed grief finally found a crack to escape through. "I'm trying," he whispered into her hair. "I'm trying to let go. I know. And you're doing it, one day at a time." They stood like that until the fire burned low, two people learning to be warm again after years in the cold. But warmth came with vulnerability, and vulnerability came with risk. In April, a man named Jackson Reeves rode into Coldwater Ridge. He was a federal marshal tracking a fugitive, and he needed local support. "I hear you're the law here," Reeves said to Elias. "I am." "Good. I need a deputy. Man I'm after is dangerous. Killed 3 people in Denver. Trail leads here." Elias's expression was unreadable. "Who is he?" "Goes by the name Silas Cord. Former miner turned outlaw. Armed and unpredictable." "And you think he's in Coldwater Ridge?" "I know he is. Saw him 2 days ago heading into town. He's hiding here. We need to find him before he hurts anyone." Elias agreed to help. But when he told Clara that night, she felt ice settle in her stomach. "This is dangerous." "It's my job. Your job is to keep the peace, not to hunt murderers." "Clara, I just got you to start living again," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I can't lose you now." Elias crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. "You won't lose me." "You don't know that." "I know I'm careful. I know I'm good at what I do. And I know I have something to come back to now. That makes me more careful, not less." Clara searched his eyes. "Promise me." "I promise." But promises, Clara was learning, couldn't always be kept. The search for Silas Cord consumed the next 3 days. Elias and Reeves questioned townspeople, searched abandoned buildings, followed leads that went nowhere. Clara tried to maintain normalcy at school, but fear gnawed at her. Every time she heard hoofbeats, every time someone ran past the schoolhouse, her heart jumped. On the 3rd night, Elias came home with blood on his shirt. "It's not mine," he said quickly, seeing Clara's face go white. "We found Cord. There was a fight. He's in custody now. Reeves is taking him to Denver tomorrow." Clara's hands shook as she helped him wash the blood away. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't. This time." Elias caught her hands, stilled them. "Clara, look at me." She did. "I've been doing this job for 7 years. Before you came, I didn't care much whether I lived or died. I took risks because I had nothing to lose. But now—" He pressed her palm against his chest over his heart. "Now I have everything to lose, so I'm more careful, more strategic. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to come home to you." The confession nearly undid her. "Elias, I love you." The words were quiet, simple, devastating. "I've been fighting it for months," he continued, "telling myself I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't. But Clara, I do. I love you, and I need you to know that before anything else happens." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "I love you too. I have for weeks." "I know." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "I could see it, and it terrified me, because loving you means risking loss, and I'd convinced myself I couldn't survive that again. And now I think maybe the real risk is never loving at all." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Clara had imagined their first kiss would be. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and deep and full of months of suppressed need. Clara kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring everything she'd been holding back into that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "Move into the bedroom with me," he said. "Really be my wife, not just on paper, but in every way that matters. Yes. I'm still going to make mistakes. I'm still going to be afraid sometimes. I know. And I'm not going to be perfect at this. Neither am I. But I want to try, really try." Clara smiled through her tears. "Then we'll try together. That night, for the first time since Clara arrived in Coldwater Ridge, she and Elias shared a bed. Not out of obligation or expectation, but out of choice, out of love. And when morning came, Clara woke to find Elias watching her, his expression soft in the early light. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I spent 7 years in the cold," he said quietly, "and you walked into it and brought me back. We brought each other back, maybe?" He traced her jawline with gentle fingers. "But Clara, I need you to understand something. What I said last night about having everything to lose, it's true, and it scares me more than anything I've ever faced." "I know." "Do you? Because if something happens to you, if I lose you the way I lost them," Clara pressed her fingers against his lips, "then you'll survive it, because you're stronger than you think, and because you've already proven you can come back from impossible grief. But Elias, we can't live our whole lives terrified of what might happen. We have to choose joy when we can find it." He kissed her palm. "Is that what you are, my joy?" "I'm trying to be. You're succeeding." They lay together in the quiet morning, two people who'd traveled different roads to the same destination. And for the first time in 7 years, Elias Boone felt something other than cold. He felt hope. Hope was dangerous. Elias had forgotten that, because hope meant wanting things, and wanting things meant being vulnerable to loss. But lying there with Clara in his arms, watching morning light filter through the window, Elias couldn't bring himself to care about the danger. For the first time in 7 years, he wanted to stay in bed, wanted to hold on to this moment, wanted to believe it could last. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "That I'm happy, and that scares me." "Why?" "Because the last time I was this happy, I lost everything." Clara shifted to look at him directly. "Elias, you can't live your whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop." "I'm not waiting. I'm just aware that happiness is fragile. Everything is fragile. That doesn't mean we don't reach for it." He pulled her closer, pressed his lips to her forehead. "You're braver than I am." "No, I'm just less practiced at protecting myself." The honesty in her words cut deep, because Clara was right. She'd come to him open and vulnerable while he'd spent months armoring himself against her. And somehow, despite everything he'd done to keep her at a distance, she'd stayed. "I don't deserve you," Elias said. "Stop saying that. You do. You just don't believe it yet." "Then help me believe it." Clara smiled. "I'm trying, but Elias, you have to let me. And that means trusting that I'm not going anywhere." "I'm working on it. I know." They stayed like that until duty called them both back to the world. But something fundamental had shifted between them. They weren't just sharing a home anymore. They were building a life. The town noticed. "Well," Martha said when Clara came into the store later that week, "someone looks happy." Clara tried to hide her smile and failed. "I am. And Elias? He is too." Martha's expression softened. "Good. That man's been walking around half dead for too long. About time he started living again." But not everyone shared Martha's sentiment. That evening, a delegation of townspeople showed up at the cabin. 3 men, Alderman Peterson, Frank Collins, and Pastor Mitchell. "Sheriff Boone?" Peterson began, his tone formal. "We need to talk." Elias invited them in, though his posture was tense. "What's this about?" "It's about you," Collins said bluntly. "About changes people are seeing." "What changes?" "You've been different lately," Pastor Mitchell said carefully. "More engaged with the community, more present. Some folks are concerned." Clara, who'd been putting away books, froze. "Concerned about what?" Elias asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "About whether you're still focused on your duties," Peterson said. "Your job requires vigilance, Sheriff, dedication. Some wonder if your domestic situation might be affecting your judgment." The implication was clear. They were questioning whether Clara was a distraction. Elias's jaw tightened. My job performance hasn't changed. Hasn't it? You've been leaving earlier, coming home more regularly, taking time for personal matters. I'm entitled to a personal life. Of course, Mitchell interjected smoothly. No one's saying otherwise. But Sheriff, you went through something terrible years ago. We all saw what it did to you. Some folks worry that opening yourself up again might compromise your effectiveness. Clara couldn't stay silent. So what are you suggesting? That he should remain emotionally dead for the rest of his life? That being happy makes him worse at his job? Mrs. Boone, Peterson said, we understand you mean well, but no. Elias cut in his voice sharp. Don't talk to my wife like that. Clara asked a fair question. Answer it. The three men exchanged glances. We're not saying you should be miserable, Collins said finally. We're saying you should be careful. The town depends on you. And if your judgment gets clouded, my judgment is clearer now than it's been in years, Elias said flatly. Because I have something to protect, something worth fighting for. That doesn't make me weaker. It makes me sharper. We hope that's true, Peterson said. But understand, Sheriff, we're watching. The town needs to know you're still the man we hired. After they left, Clara found Elias standing by the fire, his fists clenched. Elias, they think I'm a liability now, because I'm not numb anymore. They're scared. People resist change, even positive change. What if they're right? He turned to her, and she saw the fear in his eyes. What if caring about you makes me careless? What if I'm so worried about getting home to you that I make a mistake that gets someone killed? Clara crossed to him, took his face in her hands. That's not how this works. Love doesn't make you weaker. It makes you fight harder, try harder, care more. You told me that yourself when you went after Silas Cord. But what if... No, we're not doing this. We're not letting other people's fear poison what we've built. You're allowed to be happy, Elias. You're allowed to have a life outside this badge. He pulled her into his arms, held her tight. I'm so afraid of losing you. I know. But you can't prevent loss by never living. You just end up losing time you could have spent being happy. When did you get so wise? I've been practicing. Despite everything, Elias laughed. And in that moment, Clara knew they'd be all right. But fear had a way of proving itself right. 2 weeks later, young Thomas stopped showing up to school. Clara visited the family's cabin and found Thomas's mother, Sarah, looking exhausted. He's sick, Sarah said. Started 3 days ago. Fever, chills, coughing. Clara's stomach dropped. Have you seen Doc Warren? Can't afford it. And Thomas says he's fine, just needs rest. Sarah, please, let me send the doctor. We don't take charity, Clara. It's not charity, it is neighborly concern. But Sarah was firm. Pride, Clara was learning, could be as dangerous as any disease. She told Elias that night. I'll talk to Warren, he said. Make sure he checks on Thomas. Sarah doesn't have to know who paid. She'll know. Let her. Her son's health is more important than her pride. Doc Warren visited the next day, and that evening he came to see Elias and Clara with a face that told them everything before he spoke. It's not just Thomas, Warren said. I've got 4 other cases now, same symptoms. High fever, respiratory distress, weakness. What is it? Clara asked. Could be influenza, could be pneumonia, could be something worse. I won't know until it runs its course. But Clara, you need to close the school. Whatever this is, it's spreading fast. How fast? 2 more cases reported while I was examining Thomas, and if the pattern holds, we'll have a dozen by tomorrow. Elias's face went pale. Clara saw something shift in his expression, something dark and familiar. Terror. Elias, she said softly, but he was already putting on his coat. Where are you going? Clara asked. To talk to the council. We need to quarantine the sick, limit contact, set up a treatment area. I'll come with you. No. The word came out harsh. Stay here. please." He left before Clara could argue, and she understood. Because Elias had lived this nightmare before, and he was watching it happen again. The sickness moved through Coldwater Ridge like wildfire. Within 3 days, 20 people were ill. Within a week, 40. Clara closed the school and converted it into a makeshift infirmary. Doc Warren worked around the clock, but he was one man against an epidemic. So Clara helped. Along with Martha Sarah Collins and a handful of other women she tended the sick, brought water, changed bedding, held hands when the fever spiked. And every day she watched Elias unravel a little more. He barely slept, barely ate. He organized supply runs, coordinated care, made sure the healthy stayed separate from the sick. But he wouldn't enter the infirmary, wouldn't go near the patients. "Elias, we need more hands," Clara said one evening when he brought supplies but stayed outside. "Please." "I can't." "You can. You're just scared." His eyes flashed. "Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Then tell me yourself. Because right now you're doing exactly what you did when I arrived, shutting down instead of facing what scares you. This is different." "How?" "Because last time I couldn't save them." His voice broke. "I held my daughter while she burned from the inside, and I couldn't do anything. And then Emma got Clara. She was so strong. She kept fighting even when Sarah was gone. Kept telling me it would be okay. And then she couldn't breathe anymore, and I just watched her die. So yes, I'm scared, I'm terrified. Because I know what this looks like and I know how it ends." Clara's heart shattered. "It doesn't have to end that way. We have medicine now. Doc Warren knows what he's doing. People are surviving this." "Not all of them." She couldn't argue, because he was right. 3 people had died already. Mrs. Calloway, the former teacher, a minor named Jack Brennan, a child, a little girl named Lucy, only 6 years old, the same age Sarah had been. "I can't do this again," Elias whispered. "I can't watch people I care about die. I can't." "Then don't watch," Clara said firmly. "Help. Fight. Do something instead of standing outside waiting for the worst to happen." "What if the worst happens anyway?" "Then at least you tried. But Elias, people need you right now. The town needs you. I need you." His face crumpled. "What if I lose you too?" "You won't." "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't. But I know that if I get sick, I'd rather have you fighting for me than hiding from me. Wouldn't you want the same if it were me?" The question landed hard. Elias stood there trembling, and Clara saw the exact moment he made his choice. Not to stop being afraid, but to be afraid and do it anyway. "Tell me what you need," he said hoarsely. "I need you to come inside. I need you to help me save these people." He nodded, took a breath, and walked through the door. "Da tak." Elias threw himself into the work with an intensity that bordered on desperation. He carried water, changed bedding, held down patients when the fever made them delirious. He sat with the dying, held their hands, spoke words of comfort he didn't believe, but said anyway, because they needed to hear them. And every night he came home to Clara and broke down. "Thomas is worse," he'd say. Or, "Annie stopped eating." Or, "Doc Warren says we're running out of medicine." Clara held him through it all. Let him grieve, let him rage, let him be terrified. Because the alternative, shutting down completely, would destroy him. "I can't lose you," Elias said one night, holding Clara so tight she could barely breathe. "If you get sick, I'm being careful. That's not enough. It has to be. Clara, promise me. If you start feeling sick, if you get even a little bit of a fever, you'll stop working. You'll rest. You'll let Doc Warren treat you. I promise. Say it again. I promise, Elias. I'll be careful. I'll take care of myself." But promises, Clara was learning, were fragile things. It happened on a Tuesday. Clara woke feeling slightly warm. Not feverish exactly, just off. She got dressed, made breakfast, went about her day at the infirmary. By noon she had a headache, By evening, she was shivering despite 3 layers of clothing. "Clara," Martha said, touching her forehead. "You're burning up." "I'm fine." "You're sick. Go home, now. There's too much work. Go home before you infect everyone else." Clara wanted to argue, but another wave of chills hit her so violent her teeth chattered. Martha helped her to the cabin. Elias wasn't there. He was out coordinating a supply run from the next town over. Clara collapsed into bed, pulling blankets around herself, trying to stop shaking. She fell asleep and dreamed of ice. When Elias came home and found her, he went absolutely still. "Clara," she tried to answer but could only cough. Elias crossed the room in 3 strides, pressed his hand to her forehead, and felt the heat radiating from her skin. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. Not you. Please, God, not you." "Elias." Her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry. I tried to be careful." "Don't apologize. Just stay with me. Okay, stay with me." He ran to get Doc Warren. The next 3 days were a blur. Clara burned with fever, coughed until her ribs ached, drifted in and out of consciousness while Elias sat beside her bed, holding her hand, refusing to leave. Doc Warren came twice a day bringing medicine, checking her vitals, his expression growing more concerned each time. "She's strong," he told Elias on the 2nd day. "She's fighting. Is it enough?" Warren didn't answer. On the 3rd day, Clara's fever spiked so high she started hallucinating. "Sarah," she mumbled, her eyes unfocused. "Sarah, where are you?" Elias's blood ran cold. "Clara, I'm here. It's Elias. The animals need to be saved. All of them. 2 by 2. Clara, please, come back to me." But she was lost in the fever, trapped somewhere between consciousness and delirium. Elias pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, his hands shaking. "Don't leave me," he whispered. "Please, Clara. Don't leave me like they did. I can't survive it again. I'm not strong enough." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they were clear. "Yes, you are," she whispered. "You're the strongest person I know." Then the fever took her again. Elias laid his head on the bed beside her and wept. Somewhere in the darkest part of that 3rd night, Clara stopped breathing. Elias felt it instantly, the sudden stillness, the absence of her chest rising and falling. "No." He grabbed her shoulders, shook her. "Clara, Clara, breathe. Don't you dare give up. Breathe." Nothing. Elias tilted her head back, pressed his mouth to hers, breathed air into her lungs the way Doc Warren had shown him. Once, twice. "Come on, Clara. Come on." He pressed on her chest, counting compressions like Warren had taught him. 15, 16, 17. "You promised me you'd be careful. You promised, so don't you die on me now. Don't you leave me." He breathed into her mouth again, pressed on her chest. And then, by some miracle, Clara gasped. Her eyes flew open. She coughed violently, her whole body convulsing. Elias pulled her upright, supporting her as she struggled to breathe. "That's it. That's it, Clara. Breathe. Just breathe." She clutched at him, her fingers digging into his shirt, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Elias, I'm here. I've got you." I couldn't breathe." "I know. But you're breathing now. Just keep breathing." He held her through the rest of the night, monitoring every breath, refusing to close his eyes, even for a second. And when morning came, and her fever finally broke, when her breathing steadied, and her eyes cleared, Elias allowed himself to believe she might actually survive. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "I scared you." "You stopped breathing. For almost a minute, Clara. Your heart stopped. But you brought me back." "Barely." She reached up, touched his face. "You saved me. I almost lost you. But you didn't. I'm still here." Elias closed his eyes, pressed his forehead to hers. Don't ever do that to me again. I'll try not to. Clara, I can't promise I won't get sick again, Elias, or hurt, or face danger. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that I'll fight, always. I'll fight to come back to you. That has to be enough. It has to be. He kissed her, then gentle and desperate, and full of everything he couldn't say. And Clara kissed him back, tasting salt from his tears, feeling the tremor in his hands. They'd survived, both of them. Against terrible odds, they'd survived. But the epidemic wasn't over yet. And the worst, Clara would soon learn, was still to come. The worst came 2 days later, when Doc Warren collapsed. Clara was still weak, barely able to stand for more than a few minutes at a time, when Martha burst through the cabin door. "It's Warren," she gasped. "He's down. Fever hit him hard and fast. He was treating patients this morning, and by noon he couldn't stand." Elias's face went white. Who's treating the sick now? No one. That's the problem. Warren was the only one who knew what he was doing. Without him, people die. Clara finished. She pushed herself out of bed, her legs trembling. "Clara, no," Elias said immediately. "You're still recovering. I'm the only one left who's had it and survived. That means I can't get it again. I can help without risking infection. You can barely walk. Then I'll sit while I work. Elias, we don't have a choice." He wanted to argue. Clara could see it written all over his face, but they both knew she was right. "Fine," he said, "but I'm coming with you, and if you show any signs of relapse, I'm carrying you home myself. Deal." They went to the infirmary together. What they found was chaos. 40 people crammed into a space meant for 15. Patients lying on floors, coughing, moaning, calling for water. Children crying. Adults delirious with fever. And in the corner, Doc Warren unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. "Dear God," Clara whispered. Martha approached them, her eyes red from exhaustion. "I've been trying to keep everyone comfortable, but I don't know what medicines to give. Don't know how much or when. Warren had a system, but I can't figure it out." Clara moved to Warren's side, found his medical bag, started going through it. Inside were bottles, vials, syringes, all labeled in Warren's cramped handwriting. "This one's for fever," she said, holding up a bottle. "I remember him giving it to me. And this one," she picked up another. "This is for the cough. And these are antibiotics, but I don't know the dosing." "I do," came a weak voice. They all turned. Warren's eyes were half open, his face gray with fever. "Doc, don't try to talk, have to," he rasped. "Listen carefully. The fever medicine 2 spoonfuls every 4 hours. The cough syrup 1 spoonful as needed. The antibiotics." He coughed violently. "Only for the severe cases. 1 injection daily. Not more. Can cause damage." Clara grabbed paper, started writing frantically. "What else? Fluids. Keep them drinking. Dehydration kills faster than the fever. And the children, watch the children closely. Their fevers spike faster. If a child stops responding, if they go limp." Another cough. "You need to cool them down immediately. Ice water. Doesn't matter if they cry. Do it." "Okay. What about you?" Warren's eyes closed. "I'm done, Clara. I can feel it. This one's got me." "No," Elias said sharply. "You're going to fight this like everyone else. Sheriff, I'm 63 years old. My lungs are already weak. I've got maybe a day too if I'm lucky. Use that time to learn everything you can from me. Then carry on without me." The brutal honesty of it silenced everyone. But Clara refused to accept it. "We're not giving up on you. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to prioritize. Save the ones you can save. Don't waste resources on the ones you can't." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works," Warren said, his voice gaining strength from somewhere. "You've got limited medicine, limited hands, limited time. You make choices, hard choices, or everyone dies." Clara looked at Elias, saw her own anguish reflected in his eyes. "Teach us," Elias said finally. "Everything you know. We'll fight for all of them, including you. but teach us how." Warren nodded weakly. "All right, let's begin." For the next 6 hours, Warren walked them through everything. How to read symptoms, how to prioritize patients, how to administer medication safely, how to recognize when someone was too far gone to save. Clara took notes until her hand cramped. Elias asked questions, memorized procedures, forced himself to absorb information he'd spent 7 years avoiding. And when Warren finally slipped into unconsciousness again, they were left with a room full of dying people and a handful of desperate knowledge. "We can do this," Clara said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Elias looked at the patients, so many of them so sick, and Clara saw him start to shut down. "Elias, look at me." He did. "We can do this," she repeated. "But only if you stay present. Only if you don't retreat into that cold place. I need you here, with me, fighting." He took a shuddering breath. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are. You brought me back from death 2 days ago. You can do this." "That was different. That was you. And these people are our neighbors, our friends, the children I teach, the people who took me in when I was a stranger. They matter, Elias. And they need us." Something shifted in his expression. Not confidence exactly, but determination. "Tell me what to do," he said. "Start with the children. Check their fevers. If anyone's above 104, we cool them down. I'll handle medications." They worked. For 18 hours straight they worked. Elias moved from patient to patient, checking temperatures, bringing water, holding hands, offering words of comfort that came easier with each repetition. Clara administered medicine-adjusted dosages, monitored breathing, made impossible decisions about who got the last dose of antibiotics. Martha and Sarah Collins joined them. Then Pastor Mitchell. Then Frank Collins, despite his still healing injury. They became a team. A desperate, exhausted, terrified team. But a team nonetheless. And slowly, impossibly slowly, they started to see results. Annie's fever broke. Thomas started eating again. A young mother named Rebecca began breathing easier. People were surviving, but not everyone. Mrs. Hendricks died on the second night. Martha's mother-in-law, a woman who'd been kind to Clara from the beginning, slipped away quietly while they were tending to others. Martha found her first. Her scream brought everyone running. "No, no, no!" Martha sobbed, shaking the old woman's shoulders. "Mama, wake up! Please wake up!" Clara gently pulled Martha away. "She's gone, Martha. I'm sorry." But she was getting better. Yesterday she was talking, "Sometimes it happens fast," Clara said, her own voice breaking. "Sometimes there's nothing we can do." Martha collapsed against her weeping, and Clara held her thinking about how fragile life was, how quickly everything could change. Elias came over, placed a hand on Martha's shoulder. She was a good woman, and she didn't die alone. That matters. "Does it?" Martha looked up at him, her face ravaged. "Does it really matter?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "It does, because dying alone is its own kind of hell. I know. I've seen it." The weight of his words settled over them, because Elias had seen it, had lived through it. And somehow he was still standing here, still fighting, still trying to save others from experiencing what he'd experienced. Martha seemed to understand. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and stood. "Who else needs help?" "Martha, you should rest." "No, Mama wouldn't want me to quit, so who needs help?" They went back to work. On the third day, young Thomas took a turn. His fever spiked to 105. He started seizing his small body, convulsing violently. "Get him in the tub!" Clara shouted. "Ice water now!" Elias grabbed the boy, ran him to the back room where they'd set up a cooling station. He plunged Thomas into ice water, holding him steady as the child screamed and fought. "I know, son. I know it hurts, but you have to stay in. Just a little longer." Thomas thrashed, crying for his mother. Sarah Collins came running, tried to pull him out. "Sarah, no," Elias said. If we don't cool him down, the fever will kill him. You're torturing him. I'm saving him. Trust me." It was the hardest thing Clara had ever watched. Thomas screaming, Sarah sobbing, Elias holding the child down with tears streaming down his own face. But after 5 agonizing minutes, Thomas's temperature started to drop. The seizures stopped. He went limp in Elias's arms, exhausted, but alive. Elias lifted him out, wrapped him in blankets, handed him to Sarah. "He needs to rest now. Keep him warm, but not hot. If the fever spikes again, come get me immediately." Sarah nodded, clutching her son. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on him." After she left, Elias sank against the wall, shaking. Clara knelt beside him. "You did it. You saved him." "I thought I was going to kill him." The way he was screaming, Clara, it sounded like Sarah. She finished gently. "Your daughter." He nodded, unable to speak. "But this time you saved him," Clara said. "This time you knew what to do, and you did it. You didn't let fear stop you." "It almost did." "But it didn't. That's what matters." Elias pulled her close, buried his face in her shoulder. "I can't keep doing this. Watching people suffer, making these choices. I'm not built for it." "Yes, you are. You just forgot. But Elias, look what you've done in the last 3 days. You've saved lives, multiple lives. People who would have died without you are alive because you refused to walk away. What about the ones we couldn't save? We grieve them, we honor them, but we don't let their deaths stop us from fighting for the ones we can still save." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When did you get so strong?" "I've always been strong. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy protecting yourself from me." Despite everything, he laughed. "Fair point." They sat together in the quiet, gathering strength for the next crisis. Dink. Doc Warren died on the 4th day. He went peacefully in his sleep with Clara and Elias sitting beside him. "He was a good man," Elias said, closing Warren's eyes. "He was, and he taught us how to carry on without him." "Do you think we can—" Clara looked around the infirmary, at the patients who were improving, at the volunteers who were still working despite their own exhaustion, at the community that had come together in crisis. "Yes," she said. "I think we can." And they did. Without Warren, Clara became the de facto medical authority. She made the calls, distributed the medicine, trained others in basic care. Elias handled the logistics supply runs, coordinating volunteers, managing the limited resources they had left. Together, they kept the infirmary running. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. More people recovered than died. The new case rate slowed. After 2 weeks, no new infections appeared. The epidemic was ending. When they finally closed the infirmary, 37 people had survived. 11 had died. The town held a memorial service for the lost. Elias stood at the front reading names, his voice steady despite the grief written on his face. Mrs. Ellen Hendricks, Mr. Jack Brennan, Lucy Mae Foster, Dr. Samuel Warren. Clara watched him, her heart breaking and swelling at the same time. Because this man who'd been so afraid of feeling anything, was now standing in front of the entire town, publicly grieving, publicly acknowledging loss. He'd come so far. After the service, people approached them. "Thank you," Sarah Collins said, holding Thomas close. "You saved my boy." "You gave my wife a chance," Frank added. "When Warren went down, I thought we'd lost her, but you pulled her through. We couldn't have done it without all of you," Clara said. This was everyone working together. But Alderman Peterson had a different perspective. "Sheriff Boone," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology. We questioned whether your personal life would affect your work. We were wrong. You were more effective during this crisis than you've ever been. And I believe it's because you had something to fight for." Elias shook his hand. "I did. And I do." He looked at Clara. Peterson smiled. "We're lucky to have both of you." As they walked home that evening, Clara slipped her hand into Elias's. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Exhausted, sad, relieved, grateful." That's a lot of feelings for a man who spent 7 years trying not to feel anything. He pulled her closer. "You did this to me." "I know. You're welcome." "Clara." "Yes. I need to tell you something." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "I spent 7 years believing that loving someone meant setting myself up for unbearable pain," Elias said. "That the only way to survive was to stay closed off, cold. But these last few weeks, watching people die, watching others survive, I realized something." "What?" "The pain of loss is terrible. But the pain of never loving at all, of going through life numb and alone, that's worse. Because at least when you love and lose, you had something real, something worth grieving. But if you never love at all, you just have emptiness." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Elias, I'm not going to be perfect at this," he continued. "I'm still going to be afraid sometimes, still going to struggle. But I'm done living in the cold. You walked into it and brought me back, and I'm not going back there. Not ever." "Good," Clara whispered, "because I'm not letting you." He kissed her, then deep and sure, and full of promise. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. "Let's go home," Elias said. "Yes," Clara agreed. "Let's go home." They walked back to the cabin together, two people who'd survived the worst and come out stronger. Not because the worst hadn't broken them, but because they'd chosen to heal together instead of suffering alone. And as they stepped inside and closed the door against the cold, Clara thought about how far they'd come. From strangers bound by legal obligation to partners bound by choice. From two people protecting themselves to two people protecting each other. It had been a long journey, but they'd made it. Together. Together wasn't just a destination. It was a daily choice. And in the weeks after the epidemic, Clara and Elias learned what that choice actually meant. It meant Elias waking from nightmares, gasping for air, and Clara holding him until his breathing steadied. It meant Clara having moments of weakness where the memory of nearly dying hit her all over again, and Elias talking her through it. It meant both of them learning that healing wasn't linear, that some days were harder than others, and that was okay. "I dreamed about Sarah last night," Elias said one morning, his voice rough with sleep. Clara turned from the stove, studied his face. "Tell me." "She was running through a field, laughing, and I was running after her trying to catch her, but I couldn't. And then she turned around and said, 'It's okay, Papa. You can stop chasing me now.' What do you think it means?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I think it means I've been holding on to her so tight that I forgot how to let her rest. I've been carrying her death like a weight I deserve to carry forever. But Clara, she wouldn't want that. She'd want me to remember her with joy, not guilt." "Then that's what you should do." "I don't know how." "Start by telling me about her, not how she died, how she lived." So Elias did. He told Clara about Sarah's obsession with collecting rocks, about how she'd name each one and insist they had personalities, about the time she'd convinced him to have a tea party with her stuffed animals, and he'd sat on a tiny chair drinking imaginary tea while she'd served imaginary cakes with absolute seriousness. And as he talked, Clara watched something shift in his expression. The grief was still there, but it was softer now. Touched with warmth instead of just pain. "She sounds wonderful," Clara said. "She was, and Emma—" He paused, then continued. "Emma used to say that Sarah was proof that joy could exist even in hard places, that laughter mattered as much as survival." She was right. I forgot that for a long time. I thought surviving meant being hard, cold. But that's not surviving. That's just existing. Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "And now I want to live, really live, with you." "Then let's do that." Spring came to Coldwater Ridge with a vengeance. Snow melted, revealing earth that had been frozen for months. Miners returned to work. The town rebuilt what the epidemic had taken. Life, stubborn and persistent, pushed forward. Clara reopened the school. 23 students now, 3 more than before. Families who'd moved to town specifically because they'd heard about the teacher who'd helped save lives during the crisis. "You're famous," Martha teased one afternoon. "I'm not famous. I did what anyone would have done." "No. You did what most people couldn't, and people remember that." It was true. The town looked at Clara differently now. Not as the mail-order bride who'd arrived under suspicious circumstances, but as one of their own. Someone who'd proven herself when it mattered most. But fame, Clara was learning, came with expectations. The town council approached her in April. "We want to build a real clinic," Alderman Peterson said. "With Doc Warren gone, we need proper medical facilities, and we want you to run it." Clara blinked. "I'm not a doctor." "No, but you know more about medicine than anyone else in town. You kept 37 people alive when our doctor died. That counts for something." "I was just following Warren's instructions. You were making life and death decisions under impossible pressure, and you made good ones. Clara, we need this. The town needs this. Will you consider it?" She looked at Elias, who'd accompanied her to the meeting. "It's your choice," he said. "But for what it's worth, I think you'd be excellent at it." Clara took a breath. "I'll do it. But only if we can bring in a real doctor to oversee things. I'll manage day-to-day care, but I need someone with actual medical training for the serious cases." "We'll start recruiting immediately," Peterson promised. And just like that, Clara had a second career. Building the clinic took 6 months. The whole town contributed. Miners donated labor. Families donated supplies. Even the children helped carrying water and tools to the construction site. Elias supervised the building itself, making sure everything was up to code, structurally sound, properly equipped. He worked late into the night, drafting plans, checking measurements, ensuring no detail was overlooked. "You don't have to do this," Clara said one evening, finding him hunched over blueprints at the kitchen table. "I want to. This matters." "Why does it matter so much to you?" He looked up, and Clara saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "Because 7 years ago, I couldn't save my family. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, they died. But this clinic, this could save someone else's family. And maybe that means their deaths weren't completely meaningless." Clara's throat tightened. "Elias, their deaths were never meaningless. They mattered. They still matter." "I know, but I need to do this anyway. I need to build something good from all that pain. Does that make sense?" "Yes, it makes perfect sense." The clinic opened in October. It was small, just 3 rooms and a waiting area, but it was clean, well-stocked, and staffed by Clara and a young doctor named Benjamin Hayes, who'd come west looking for purpose and found it in Coldwater Ridge. On opening day, the whole town showed up. "This is for Doc Warren," Pastor Mitchell said during the dedication. "And for everyone we lost, and for everyone we saved. May this place be a symbol of hope in hard times." Everyone applauded. But it was what happened after the ceremony that mattered most. An old miner named Jack Peterson, no relation to the alderman, approached Clara hesitantly. "Ma'am, I've got this cough. Had it for months. Didn't want to bother nobody about it, but—" "Come inside," Clara said immediately. "Let's take a look." She examined him, listened to his lungs, asked questions. Then she called Dr. Hayes in for a second opinion. "It's pneumonia," Hayes said. "Early stages. Treatable if we start now." They treated him. And 2 weeks later, Jack Peterson was back at work, healthy and grateful. "You saved my life," he told Clara. "I just did my job." "No, you cared enough to do it right. That's different." Clara thought about that conversation later, lying in bed beside Elias. "He's right, you know," Elias said. "You do more than just treat people. You make them feel seen, valued. That matters as much as the medicine." "Is that what you do? As sheriff?" "I try, though I'm not as good at it as you are." "You're better than you think. People trust you, Elias. They depend on you. And not just because you wear a badge. Why then? Because you're fair, because you listen, because when something bad happens, you show up. You don't hide. Not anymore. He pulled her closer. That's because of you. No, that's because you chose to change. You made me want to change. That's the same thing. Clara smiled against his shoulder. Then we'll call it a team effort. The first real test of their new life together came in December. A young woman named Grace Morrison arrived in town heavily pregnant and alone. She'd been traveling to meet her husband at a mining camp further west when her stagecoach broke down in a snowstorm. By the time she reached Coldwater Ridge, she was in labor. Clara and Dr. Hayes delivered the baby, a healthy girl, but Grace developed complications afterward. Severe bleeding that wouldn't stop. We're losing her. Hayes set his face pale. I don't know what else to do. Clara looked at the young mother, thought about Emma dying after childbirth, thought about Elias watching his wife slip away. We're not giving up, she said firmly. She tried everything Warren had taught her, applied pressure, administered medication, kept Grace talking, kept her conscious, refused to let her drift away. And after 2 terrifying hours, the bleeding finally stopped. Grace survived. Her daughter thrived. And when Elias came to check on them later, he found Clara sitting beside Grace's bed, holding the baby, tears streaming down her face. Clara. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. She's alive, Elias. Both of them are alive. He understood. Because this was the outcome he'd been denied 7 years ago. The miracle that hadn't come for Emma and Sarah. He sat beside Clara, looked at the sleeping infant in her arms. She's beautiful, he said softly. She is. Clara looked up at him. Grace is naming her Emma, after your wife. She said she wanted to honor the woman whose husband helped save her life. Elias's breath caught. I didn't save her. You did. We both did. As a team. He wiped his eyes, trying to process the weight of it all. That his wife's name would live on in this child. That something good had come from the grief he'd carried for so long. Can I hold her? He asked. Clara carefully transferred the baby to his arms. Elias looked down at little Emma Morrison and felt something crack open inside his chest. Not pain, not grief, but something lighter. Hope, maybe. Or healing. Hi there, he whispered. Welcome to the world. You're going to be just fine. Your mama's strong, and this town will take care of you. I promise. Clara watched him, her heart so full it hurt. Because this man who'd been so afraid to feel anything, was now cradling a newborn with tears in his eyes, making promises about the future. He'd come so far. They both had. Go. 2 years passed. 2 years of daily choices, of building a life together, of learning that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a practice refined through repetition and commitment. The clinic thrived. Clara treated everything from broken bones to childhood illnesses to difficult births. Dr. Hayes handled the surgeries and serious cases. Together they made Coldwater Ridge one of the healthiest towns in the territory. Elias remained sheriff, but his approach had changed. He was still firm, still fair, but now he led with compassion instead of just duty. He started programs to help struggling families, created work opportunities for men who'd lost jobs due to injury, became not just the law, but a pillar of the community. And their marriage deepened. They learned each other's rhythms, learned when to push and when to give space, learned that some arguments were worth having and others weren't, learned that saying, "I'm sorry," wasn't weakness, it was strength. One evening in their 3rd spring together, Clara came home to find Elias building something in the yard. "What are you making?" she asked. "A swing. For children." Clara's heart jumped. "Elias, I know we haven't talked about it," he said quickly. "And I know after everything that happened to Emma and Sarah, the idea of having children again terrifies me. But Clara, I've been thinking. We've built this good life together. And maybe Maybe it's time to fill it with more than just work. Are you saying you want a family? I'm saying I want our family, however that looks. If it's children, wonderful. If it's just us, that's wonderful too. But I want to stop living like I'm waiting for the next disaster. I want to choose joy. Choose life. Choose us. Clara crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. I want that too. Yeah. Yes. And Elias, for what it's worth, I think you'd be an amazing father. I was before, and I failed. You didn't fail. You were human. You couldn't control what happened, but you can control what happens now. And I think if we're going to do this, we do it together. Both of us. Sharing the weight and the joy. He kissed her, then deep and sure. Together, he agreed. 6 months later, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made working at the clinic nearly impossible. Swelling pain, fear that something would go wrong. And Elias was terrified. What if something happens to you? He asked one night, his hand resting on her growing belly. Then Dr. Hayes will handle it, and you'll handle it, because you're stronger than you think. Clara, I can't lose you. You won't. I'm healthy. Hayes says everything is progressing normally, and I have the best care available. That's what I thought before. And Emma still died. Clara took his face in her hands. I am not Emma. This is not 7 years ago. And you are not the same man who lost everything. You're the man who fought through an epidemic, who saved lives, who rebuilt himself from nothing. Trust that man. Trust us. It was a daily battle. Every time Clara felt a pain, Elias panicked. Every doctor's visit, he asked 100 questions. Every night he lay awake listening to her breathe, terrified that she'd stop. But slowly, as the pregnancy progressed and Clara remained healthy, his fear began to ease. And when their daughter was born on a cold February morning, screaming and perfect and absolutely healthy, Elias wept. She's perfect, he whispered, holding the tiny infant against his chest. Clara, she's perfect. She is. What should we name her? Elias looked down at his daughter, thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, everything they'd built. Hope, he said. Her name is Hope. Clara smiled through her tears. It's perfect. 5 years later, Elias stood at the door of their home, larger now with additions built to accommodate their growing family, and watched the sun set over Coldwater Ridge. Hope was 7 now, running through the yard, with her younger brother William chasing her. Clara was in the clinic treating a last-minute patient. The library operated 3 evenings a week from their main room, filled with children and adults seeking books and connection. Life was full, chaotic, sometimes overwhelming. It was everything. Papa, Hope called, come play with us? In a minute, sweetheart. That's what you always say. She was right. He did always say that, because sometimes he still needed these moments standing alone, breathing, reminding himself that this was real, that he'd made it through the worst and come out the other side with something beautiful. The door opened behind him. Clara stepped out, wrapped her arms around him from behind. You're thinking again, she said. Always. About what? About how I almost missed this, all of it. Because I was so afraid of losing again that I nearly lost everything, by never trying. Clara rested her head against his back. But you didn't. You chose to try. That's what matters. I chose you. That's what matters. We chose each other. Hope ran up to them, breathless and laughing. Mama, Papa, will you read to us, please? Elias looked at his daughter, so alive, so full of joy, and thought about the last time he'd read to a child. About Sarah. About how he'd convinced himself he could never do it again without breaking. But that was then. This was now. Yes, he said, scooping Hope into his arms. Let's read. What story do you want? The one about the animals on the ark. Of course, the same story he'd read to Sarah all those years ago. But this time, when Elias settled into the chair with both children curled against him, when he opened the familiar book and began to read, It didn't break him. It healed him. Because Sarah's memory didn't have to be painful. It could be a bridge between who he'd been and who he'd become, between the father he'd lost and the father he was now. Clara watched from the doorway, her hand resting on her belly, pregnant again, though they hadn't told the children yet, and felt her heart overflow. This man, this family, this life. It had all started with a choice. A choice to step off a stagecoach into a storm. A choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. A choice to love a man who was convinced he couldn't be loved. A choice to pull him back from the cold instead of letting him freeze. And Elias had made choices too. To let her in. To try. To believe that healing was possible. To step back into warmth even when the cold felt safer. They'd both chosen this, over and over, through fear and pain and loss and joy, and they'd built something unshakable. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Elias stood together on their porch, looking out at the town they'd helped build. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Clara asked. "When I stepped off the stagecoach." "Every day." "What do you remember most?" "How cold it was. How scared I was that you'd see through me. How certain I was that I'd ruin your life." "And now," Elias pulled her close, "now I know the truth. Which is that you didn't come here to marry a cold man. You came here to remind a frozen man what warmth felt like, and then you stayed long enough for me to thaw." Clara smiled. "That's poetic." "I learned from the best." They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in the coldest, hardest circumstances and chosen to build something warm. "I love you," Elias said. "I love you too. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself." He kissed her temple, held her close, and felt the last piece of ice that had been lodged in his chest for 7 years finally melt completely. Because Clara was right. Some people weren't cold by nature. They were just afraid of losing warmth again. And the strongest love wasn't the kind that swept you off your feet in passion and romance. It was the kind that stayed, that waited, that pulled you back from the edge and showed you that healing was possible. Elias Boone had spent 7 years standing in the cold, convinced he deserved to freeze. But Clara Whitmore had walked into that storm, taken his hand, and refused to let go until he remembered what it felt like to be warm. And together they'd built a life that proved something simple but profound. Love wasn't about never being broken. It was about choosing to heal together, choosing hope over fear, choosing warmth over cold, and choosing each other every single day, no matter what came. That was the real miracle. Not that they'd survived the worst, but that they'd chosen to live fully anyway.